In this video, I'm going to walk you through answering this 25 marker question. This is from Edexcel Paper 1. I'm going to go through the structure of the question, how we would answer it, what options we have in terms of evaluation. This is a question about switching from oil cars to electric powered vehicles. So we're going to be talking about stuff like negative externalities. We're going to talk about the economics of the oil industry, probably the economics of the car industry. Let's get into the question. So the International Energy Agency has predicted that oil use by cars will peak in 2025 because of the increasing number of drivers switching to electric vehicles. Evaluate the likely microeconomic consequences of consumers shifting from vehicles powered by fuel obtained from oil to electric powered vehicles. So for my 25 markers, I will generally split the answer into two major topics. And I think we've got a few different options here. I would definitely want to use negative externalities, given that we're talking about oil and electric powered vehicles. I'd be thinking about pollution. Burning fossil fuels as a negative externality. I think that's a major part of the question. I'd also think we can talk about how this is likely to affect prices for things like petrol. I think we could talk about how this would affect the economics of traditional car vehicles, like that sort of market, that industry. We could talk about the electric car industry and how that's likely to raise prices there. So I think there's a range of different stuff we can talk about. We could talk about consumer and producer surplus. I'm definitely going to make topic A negative externalities. And I am tempted to do for B, I would be maybe talking about effects on the car industry as a broad category. And we'll talk about a few different things within that. So what I'm looking for then within each of these topics, I'm going to do an analysis paragraph and an evaluation paragraph. My analysis paragraph, I'm going to want at least one, if not two, definitions. I'm going to want a diagram. I want my actual analysis, evidence, if I can come up with some. So this is a 25 marker. It doesn't have any extracts. So this is going to be examples that I can come up with to support my argument. In terms of definitions, I'm almost certainly, I'm definitely going to have a definition of negative externalities. Right. I'm also probably going to define external costs. I might talk about sort of private benefits. Those are definitely going to be terms that I would be using. I might be defining deadweight loss, deadweight welfare loss. Negative externalities will be my main explicit definition. I might also do an explicit definition of deadweight loss. I might include, when I'm defining negative externalities, some discussion of external and internal costs. So I think that would look like negative externalities are when the consumption or production of a product has external costs, costs to third parties not directly involved, costs to third parties not directly involved in the transaction, beyond the private costs, right? So my private costs will be the costs paid by the supplier in the production of the good. Now I'm kind of being specific here. This is like a negative externality. I might talk about external benefits. Deadweight welfare loss will be the loss to general welfare caused by the consumption of a good. In this case, the pollution by car exhaust is lowering general welfare. My diagram, I'm going to have a negative externality diagram. In terms of evidence, I might maybe say like air pollution in Mumbai might be my example. You're also getting application points, by the way, from providing the diagram and using it to support your argument. In these 25 markers is also for some application points. I like to have some kind of real world example that's going to ground my argument to use as evidence. And my analysis is basically just going to be explaining the diagram and explaining this definition. So I would say switching from fossil fuel cars to electric powered vehicles will close the externality caused by the consumption of fossil fuel vehicles, and will therefore reduce the deadweight loss, bringing consumption of fossil fuel cars closer to the socially optimum point. Okay. I might also, within this explanation, I might talk about, although I might save it for topic B, like stuff like substitute goods, cross elasticity of demand. I actually think I'm going to save that for topic B. I think my evaluation here might be like, this is kind of specific to electric cars, but saying electric cars can also cause pollution depending on how the electricity they use was produced. Also, there are other negative externalities associated with electric cars. And this is like, I don't necessarily expect you to know this. You might be able to point to other negative externalities like production externalities. I'm saying like the mining of lithium for electric car batteries is quite harmful to the environment. So you can make this point perfectly fine without knowing that piece of information. I happen to know it now. You know it. That's a useful. If you can do that in an essay, it's super useful. Again, you're showing off your general economic knowledge. I guess if you get a question about electric cars, you'll know that too. In terms of the effects on the car industry, I'm definitely going to be thinking about substitute goods, cross elasticity of demand, as my sort of, again, like the concepts that I may be looking at. I might even think, if we're considering electric cars maybe more of a premium product, I might be tempted to talk about maybe income elasticity of demand. Again, this is kind of taking an opportunity to show off what knowledge you can remember from the course. For a diagram, I might do side by side supply and demand diagrams that illustrate cross elasticity of demand. So basically, like, I could show, for example, because I think I'm going to go down the route of like trying to compare how prices for one good affect another, as demand for electric vehicles is sort of driven maybe by like higher costs for petrol or something like that. So if the price of, let's say, if the price for uh, for fossil fuel cars goes up, I would expect that to lead to an increase in demand for electric cars. So you could sort of show those happening side by side to illustrate the relationship. Like, my evidence might be, if I want to make that connection to oil prices, I might say current high oil prices have led many consumers to consider electric cars a more affordable option in the long run. And then my analysis is probably going to be like, these are substitutes, likely to have an elastic cross elasticity of demand. the rise in the, and specifically we want to talk about the rise in electric powered vehicles, the rise in the demand for electric powered vehicles will lower demand for fuel vehicles, potentially their market price. This might discourage producers from producing so many. So I'm sort of thinking about going along those lines in terms of the analysis. Like, how is this going to hit? And then we could build on this further and say, like, this might hurt some of these sort of traditional car companies. Maybe they consider developing lines of electric cars to respond to demand. There's lots of different ways you can take that as an argument. I might say, in terms of valuation, I might say factors like the lack of available charging stations in certain areas might mean that electric vehicles do not completely replace fossil fuel vehicles, or there might be a ceiling to their growth in terms of market penetration. I might even say some car companies, another alternative here would be to say some car companies may try to respond with pricing strategies to maintain their market share. So underpricing cars, fossil fuel cars. So you could talk about that as well, because I think you can make the argument traditional car industries have high barriers to entry and tend to be a bit more oligopolistic. I think like very large market players like General Motors in the US. I can't remember what the name of, but there's like a big conglomerate that's got a very silly name that I can't now remember. But it's a lot of car brands that you will have heard of are sort of in these big conglomerates. They might be trying to protect their market share, or they might acquire electric car vehicles. Those are kind of the two ways they could go. But your evaluation might be maybe these traditional car companies will respond more aggressively to the growth of electric vehicles, and that might undermine the growth in the long run. So broadly, this is how I would respond to the argument. I think in terms of conclusion, I might say we're trying to sort of bring these ideas together. So I might say like these sort of factors are compelling in terms of arguing that there's a limit to the growth of the electric car industry, and therefore that means there's also a limit to the benefit of removing electric vehicles. So maybe like there's a limit to the amount of the like climate change, for example, that this is meaningfully going to impact. Maybe it's not going to remove that negative externality as much as we previously thought. And I think, yeah, broadly, that's what I would say in the conclusion. But I don't think this like produces a super nice conclusion, this topic. I hope this was helpful in terms of understanding how to structure this. We have a bunch of other videos on the channel that are so similar if you want to look for other topics, and we'll be doing videos basically daily.